It was wonderful to see, and this is a day for them. This is a moment for them. And I'm just very pleased. I also want to thank the jury in this case, the second trial. They were able to overcome a lot of the preconceived notions and the great myths that you sometimes see, the delay in reporting, which is so often the case in these types of cases. They were able to come together and understand that those things can happen and yet crimes are committed. So I'm very proud of the jury and coming through and rendering the right decision. And then lastly, our team, Ms. Anson, Ariel Anson, we brought on board another colleague, Deputy District Attorney Ethan Milius, to come in and assist. His assistance was invaluable. And so we were able to ultimately present the case to this jury, and they were able to see through the evidence and come to the right decision, finding this defendant, Mr. Masterson, accountable.
The Meghann Cuniff, we saw the two victims walking out of this courthouse hand in hand. Did they see them as well? What did you say to them as this
So I did not get a chance to see them coming out. It does not surprise me that they're hand in hand. They have been together in this fight for some time, and over the years I've talked to each one of them many times. I'm not going to say I've gotten to know them pretty well and their families. I'm just happy that they were able to be here today and to express themselves. I know it's something that they never thought that they would have, given the time and these cases are hard to oftentimes prove. So I'm happy that they got their justice. Well, everything that kind of goes along with that, it's a lot of the, again, a lot of these preconceived notions where people say, well, it's like 20 years old, does it really still matter anymore? It's 20 years old, why didn't she say something sooner? But that's where it's important for us to make sure that we're able to convey to a jury that those things happen. That's not unusual, especially when you're dealing with rapes of a known offender or someone that you maybe have been in a relationship for some time. So you just have to overcome those obstacles and get the jury to understand that just because it's delayed reporting, even if it's been 20 years, it still matters. Crime still happens, and somebody needs to be held accountable despite the length of time.
Mr. Taylor, can you speak a little louder because I'm a fan, unfortunately. Can you speak about the significance of just Church of Scientology doctrines in this case, and what, if any, interference you guys faced from them during the trial? There were victims that talked about intimidation. Just talk a little bit about what they.
I think the judge kept us very focused on what she believed and what we believed was relevant in terms of being brought into the case. Obviously, the church, since all of them were members, now 4 members, they kind of still lived under those rules and guidelines that the church imposed, and I think that contributed in large part to a lot of their actions in terms of delayed reporting, not wanting to get in trouble, concerns over being declared a suppressive person. So it was good again for the jury to be able to hear some of that in order to get an understanding of why these victims or some of these victims behaved and responded in certain ways.
And have you guys made a decision on retrying the count that was deadlocked again, or is that something still?
Yes, we will not be. Meghann, I got it's a good question.
What was the question?
There's
When will we
that's
be
a good,
eligible for
there is a statute that deals with elder parole. So there is a period of time prior to the 30 years that Mr. Masterson may be eligible for parole. So I can't tell you exactly what that number is.
The sentence that he got today, Brent, that's the maximum sentence.
Yes.
Now, you talked in there about what you've learned in your 11 years as a sex crimes prosecutor and just your empathy for the victims, but it seems like the presence of the Church of Scientology was something unique in this case. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And how did you deal with that in the second trial? I know there was an expert witness that was brought in.
So in the second trial, we, for lack of a better word, we retooled it a little bit. I mean, obviously the evidence was the same, but I think the manner in which we presented it, we kind of changed it up a little bit. We had a different expert testifying to the witness, but we also were able to bring in an expert with regard to the policies dealing with the Church of Scientology. So I think that probably had some influence in terms of corroborating much of what the victims had to say.
Is that the Church of Scientology is accused of prosecuting
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing to that. Everything that we have done has always been with an eye toward what is materially relevant in the case, explaining why certain conduct. Oftentimes, if victims are concerned by coming forward and testifying, or having concerns about testifying on the stand, we explore as to why that is. There's some information that causes
I also wanted to ask about Scientology and ask specifically about the grand jury to which one singer testified that some of his clients who were Scientologists had their legal fees paid by the church. Now that the sentencing is complete, can we expect anything additional to come of that? A potential obstruction of justice charge brought against the church?
So the best way that I can answer that is that I can't answer that.
Gotcha.
I can't confirm or deny anything about that. If there's any pending investigation that may be forward, it's not something I can comment on.
I understand. Thank you.
Now, this morning, the victims' lawyers did ask if they could get more information about what the discovery was that was leaked to Scientology, and it seems like that's still unresolved. Can you talk about what their request was and how you're going to deal with
my
that?
understanding is the request was that they wanted whatever we had been provided to us coming from the Church of Scientology, I should say more accurately, coming from Vicky Podgorski. And those documents, I believe they wanted to examine, either have a copy of or examine all of those documents that we had received.
Yeah.
It was working very well here. On a retrial, no retrial, and
No retrial.
We missed the very beginning. Could we please get your initial reaction to the decision today?
I have a lot of different feelings about it. I am obviously, number one, I'm thrilled for the victims. I'm very happy for the victims because this is a day that they were looking forward to, and they got their justice as a long time coming. That's first and foremost. But also being very thankful for the jury to come to kind of see through everything and recognize what the evidence is, and that this defendant is going to be held accountable. So I'm very thankful for that. And I've been involved in the investigation on this case for almost 7 years since its inception. So I do have some belief that it's that we finally have wrapped it up.
Were you surprised by the judge's comments in there? Some judges don't say anything, others have a lot to say. Olmedo had a lot to say to Danny Masterson.
Actually, I'm not. I can't really say why, other than knowing this judge. I've had other trials before. So yeah, no, I'm not surprised.
How would you evaluate this sentence based on your experience? Is this a typical sentence for these crimes? Is it harsh?
No, I would say without getting into the weeds of it, but once you get into the special allegations where you're talking about multiple victims, and when you're talking about sex crimes, and when you're talking about forcible sex crimes, this is not unusual at all. These are high sentences. They're typically indeterminate, and very frequently run consecutive to one another if you have multiple counts. And there's a reason for that. The legislature has determined that these crimes warrant stiff sentences.
Do you think the Harvey Weinstein case had any bearing on this case? Perhaps that was a question.
This case was earlier than Weinstein.
I don't. No, I mean, I fully respect that. They're going to present issues for appeal, but I'm not.
I kind of want to rephrase his question. I'm not suggesting Weinstein's conviction here or there influenced this case, but one of the things the defense kept bringing up is lack of DNA, lack of physical evidence. I feel like 10, 15 years ago, I'm just curious in your experience, that used to be a larger hurdle than it is. Now you're seeing more cases convicted on corroboration and like prior archives complaints. Can you just talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Over the years, I have seen a shift. We now call, let's say, for instance, counterintuitive victim behaviors, the lack of DNA, bruises, not enough bruises. There's early reporting. All of those things years ago, I think, have a much greater impact in terms of getting the jury to understand. I think we've come around a bit now, which is why this is so important here, because this is one of those cases 20 years old, right? And you're going to have people who go, well, this is 20 years ago. But keep in mind, there is evidence out there for a prosecutor who wants to go search. This doesn't just have to be a he said, she said. There's always some corroboration out there if you look hard. And in this instance, we had victims who had reported early to friends, fresh complaint witnesses, and the jury. Again, this is why I'm so happy with these juries, that they understood that despite all of that, from the evidence that they've heard, this defendant was guilty of these charges, and they were able to come together and make that decision collectively, despite all of the noise and everything else that might have come out on defense. So one jury at a time, one courtroom at a time, as these things happen, it just gets better for victims of sexual self-deprecation.
What do you attribute that to, that trend of jurors becoming smarter or jurors becoming more different in how they react?
It's still, it's still there, but I think it's so important that the case gets presented in a way where you are really getting the jury to understand, look, these things are normal. This is not something that, just because a victim behaved a certain way, or just because a victim, went back into the relationship with someone, that doesn't automatically conclude the fact that there was a sexual assault. So it's just getting that information conveyed and hoping that the jury gets it. And this jury did.
Can we get you to give us your first and last name? Spell both for us, please.
Sure. The first name is Reinhold, common spelling. Reinhold. Last name Mueller, Mueller.
W-E-L-L-E-R. Right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brandon.
Okay, there we go. Just 1 second here, guys. I'll be back.
Go, Megan.
Yeah. What's up, guys? Oh man, it was a busy morning. Can you hear me? Everybody there? Sorry for the bad camera and probably bad sound on that press conference there, but figured it was better than nothing. I've got a video, so I'll get that up on Facebook soon. But it's a crazy morning. But yeah, I'm sure everybody saw the news. 30 years to life. What's up, guys? Get my phone charger here. Is everybody in here? I'm going to tweet this out soon, too, that I'm going live. It's had a big old presser. Hope you guys were able to tune in. Yeah, no, I mean, that's always the problem. Like, you can't even hear that press conference. He's not talking into the microphone. There's a crazy person out on the street just screaming, like purposely trying to interrupt the press conference. It's just how those things go, you know? Right now, there's a bunch of people. Oh, it's Reinhold Mueller giving more comments up there. Maybe I'll take this up here and see if we can see him, because you can actually hear him, and you actually might be able to hear him more up there. Let me take this up there. It's old Reinhold's moment in the sun right now. You know, he's a Washington State University Cougar, Reinhold Mueller. Go Cougs. Let's see. He's from Spokane, actually. Let me see. I'm just going to have to turn it around.
They were all nervous about speaking and giving their statements. Share just the impact of everything that they've had to deal with as a result of this defendant.
What message does this sentencing send?
Not just the sentencing, but I think the circumstances with this as well. Sometimes get a reaction, the fact that this was 20 years old, you got now sentencing at 31. I think it shows that there is justice. And I think for people who feel that, too much time is sexual assault victims who feel that too much time has gone by, why should I come forward? Is anybody going to take me seriously? Is it going to be worth it? I think what this shows is, yes, there is justice despite all of that. it's important for victims of sexual assault to recognize that there are people out there that need that and be there for them.
And 30 years, that was the maximum that Danny Masterson could have gotten.
That's correct. Yeah, for the statute. Yes.
Any other questions, you guys? Anything else that you're left with after today? How do you feel?
I feel really happy that the victims feel that justice is served. As Frank explained, this has been wrong. And there's finally an ending to the madness that they've had to endure, starting from the time of their assaults all the way through until the verdict and then today's sentencing. So I feel relieved for them.
Long road. That first trial didn't make it through. You have doubts that the second trial wouldn't result in a sentencing either?
I think with every trial, there's never a guarantee. I'm hopeful that this jury would get it right, and I'm so thankful that they did.
I think both of us, when we went back that day after we learned there was a mistrial, we kind of looked at each other and we said, oh yes, we're going to do this again. And I think that we felt, just retool a few things and then go at it again. As long as we had the support of the victims in wanting to do this again, because that's a lot to ask when we go through this. Not just the preliminary hearing, but then also the first trial, and then into the second. But they didn't hesitate. They said, do this again. So from that moment on, we were just charging ahead in terms of what we were going to do for this next trial.
And retooled a few things. I mean, Scientology was really brought in a lot more in that second trial. Was that what did?
I don't know that it was that single thing that did it. I think it's a number of things, but I think it certainly helped because we were able to bring a Scientology expert to kind of reinforce and corroborate what they heard already from these victims in terms of consequences for reporting to law enforcement and a lot of things that they had been testifying to. It just kind of bolstered that a little bit, provided credibility. So I think that helped. But I think this jury, very happy with this jury. I think they understood a lot of this, and I just give them such credit for coming together and finding the truth and getting to the right thing.
Thank you so much. All right, we gotta go to an iPad, I think.
For other victims, do you have any advice for all the other victims out there? And with the way the laws are designed for victims, is there any way change could benefit victims and future victims?
Well, so I feel that I guess if there was a message that I would want victims to know is that they're not alone. A lot of times victims will sit with this and go through the decision-making process. So, well, should I come forward? Should I not? Is it really going to matter? Is anybody going to listen to me? I'm just this one person who's going to believe it, right? My message would be to come forward, that there are people who will fight. And obviously there's never any guarantees on an outcome, right? But at least to listen to you, perhaps conduct some investigation, and then just kind of see where it goes. And that's kind of how we started here. It's just an investigation back in 2016, 2017 for a number of years, and here we are. We couldn't we would be here, but with some diligence and hard work on the investigation, didn't make a difference.
This verdict was a long time coming, so what message does it send to victims out there? They feel that they can't fight the Hollywood system or something like Scientology.
This was a long time coming. I would say, there were some unique circumstances in this case as to why that was. Again, we've had victims who felt that they could not come forward. They feared repercussions. They felt that there would be circumstances if they didn't, consequences if they did. So that factored in. But it's what I told the jury at the very end when I said, for any of you who believe you're asking yourself when you get back there, the fact that this is 20 years ago doesn't really matter. And I told them, yes, it does matter, because consequences always matter. There's regardless of how long ago it happened, if these crimes were committed, there's a person responsible, he needs to be held accountable, regardless of the time. So I say, don't let that be a deterrence to you. Don't be afraid to come forward. Yes.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Just give me a second. I'm going to get positioned here.
For the accusers against Masterson, that they could potentially be targeted the way he might have been. Should they be concerned about their safety, their security, and not a retaliation from the government or other lawyers like yourself?
Well, I think,
this is a very dangerous case that you guys.
Well, but and this was in investigation for almost 4 years.
And even the investigators didn't believe the accusers. We know that.
Well,
we know that.
I don't know that that's true. I don't think that was
they
the
admitted
testimony.
to it.
I think
It wasn't a testimony, but
yeah.
Should we be concerned as citizens that we could now be targeted 20 years later for something with little to no evidence?
No, because there was corroborating evidence in this case, and again, this is the investigations get conducted. If we believe that there's insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury, then charges just don't get filed.
The first jury did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who we gonna have?
Yeah.
Thanks,
Oh,
guys.
yeah, it's gone, I said.
All right. These things always just kind of take a life of its own. Let me go get positioned here. I'll get ready to give. All right. What's up, guys? Sorry, these things are like absolutely crazy. Just running around, trying to get everything, trying to get photos. I'm assuming Masterson's family went out the other exit. That's what they've been doing. Yeah, I don't know if anyone could even hear that press conference, but I figured it's better than ever. I had to laugh at the person in the comments who was like, "Meghann, consider investing in a noise reduction microphone." It's like, what? I don't have. Dude, this is just my laptop. It's this or nothing. So here, I am going to tweet that I'm doing the live stream. I'm going to get into some details here. I hope you guys, as we speak, are have my story up on legalaffairsandtrials.com and are going through it, because there are a ton of details there that didn't make the tweets. I mean, I didn't want to just live tweet the whole thing, but that's one really nice thing about Judge Olmedo is she allows reporters to use laptops. If we're sitting in the back row, we can type. We're not supposed to transmit in the courtroom, but we can type, which is it's frustrating that other judges won't allow that, because it is so much easier to take notes and get a story out in a timely fashion. But it's always just kind of crazy. I've got a bunch of emails I got to respond to about TV appearances, Nightline wants to talk to me, CBS 2. I mean, I figured this was going to be big, because sentencings are always so definitive, and everybody, I think if you say that 70s show, it jogs their memory. I mean, even if people don't recognize the name Danny Masterson right away, they might recognize that 70s show. And then I think the Scientology aspect added a huge intrigue to the whole trial. But wow, I got to say, as a reporter who's covered a lot of these, kind of most remarkable to me, and it wasn't like rare that the judge would do this. I just haven't seen it in a while. I mean, Judge Hereford didn't do it in Tory Lanez's trial, but Olmedo really laid into Masterson at the end. I mean, she wasn't like vicious in her tone, but what she said, I mean, as I said in the article, she verbally dismantled his defense and told him he's guilty. I mean, she really let him have it, you know. But here, let me let everybody know I am live. Oh gosh, but these things are just so, you know, there's so much going on. There's so much emotion in the sentencing that happens because unlike Harvey Weinstein's case, Judge Olmedo is allowed the victim. She was Masterson's girlfriend of 6 years, who was a charged victim, but the jury actually didn't convict him on that rape charge. They convict him on 2 rape charges and then split 8-4 in favor of guilty on the 3rd charge. So prosecutors back in August asked Olmedo if the 3rd victim he wasn't convicted of could make a victim impact statement. And she said yes. She didn't allow the 2 women who testified as prior bad acts witnesses to give statements, but she did allow a statement from Chrissy Bixler, which is different than what Judge Lynch did in Harvey Weinstein's case. Judge Lynch only allowed the victim that the jury convicted him on to give a victim impact statement. But Olmedo just said that her reading of Marcy's law allows for that. And I think what would have been really unusual would have been if she had allowed the prior bad acts witnesses, but allowing the other victim who was actually charged as a victim was a decision she felt good about. She stood by that today. The morning started with the victim's lawyers actually telling Olmedo that they're trying to get more information on the discovery that the 2 lawyers who used to represent Danny Masterson, one being Tom Mesereau, the famous celebrity lawyer, they were actually sanctioned a couple months ago by Olmedo for releasing discovery in the case to the Church of Scientology. The DA's office actually found out about it because Vicky Probret, I'm going to mispronounce her name, but Vicky, the Scientology's outside counsel, who also strangely represented Marilyn Flynn, the USC dean in this public corruption case that I covered. But Vicky sent an email to the DA's office complaining about the prosecution against Masterson, and she included a link to like a Dropbox that had tons of confidential discovery in the case. So the prosecutors were like, how did you possibly get all this stuff? And the judge concluded that 2 lawyers, Sharon Applebaum, and then Tom Mesereau had to have leaked it to the church. So today started with the victim's lawyers at Boyce Schiller telling Olmedo that they want basically copies of everything that the church was leaked, just so they know what the victims are up against and how they can protect themselves. It didn't get resolved because I think the prosecutors were saying that they don't think they can release that stuff because it's not their property because they're police reports, but it's a discussion that's ongoing. And I'm gonna tweet out that I'm live here, see if we can get some more people in. Happy to take any questions too if you guys have them. I mean, I figure I'll just kind of go through what happened chronologically. But like I said, I really hope everybody is at legalaffairsandtrials.com reading the article because I can take notes pretty freaking fast, guys. I mean, somebody once leaned into me and they're like, wow, it's incredible how fast you can do that. But somebody who I tweeted about was like, wow, you're really fast. But yeah, the back and forth between Leah Remini and Holly Baird, who was the flack for Masterson's lawyers, was like, both of you guys need to grow up and be a little more professional. But hold on here. One thing, and I tweeted this earlier, but I said earlier that Danny would be in jail garb, which, I mean, they usually are, but they allowed him to change into a suit for the court hearing. So he was in a suit. He's got a thick beard, which I think is pretty normal, Danny Masterson. I think the beardless Danny Masterson was just for the jury. But here, I'm tweeting this out right now. So yeah, and then like I said in a tweet, this is actually a normal sentencing with a normal judge, so it's not going to take 2 days. I mean, this just underscored how weird that whole Tory Lanez 2-day thing where like all his friends and family were allowed to speak. It's like, what? Somebody wants to know the mood in the courtroom. I mean, it's hard. One thing I will say that the sheriff's deputies who just like hassle us and regulate us and like stand in our way and whisper and chat when the victims are making statements, they ruin the atmosphere in there. Like those sheriff's deputies, I mean, it is such a hassle to have them in there. They just hassle people all morning long. And then the whispering when the victim impact statements are happening is really annoying because it's really hard to hear in there already. You're packed in there with people. They're not speaking into the microphones. And then the PIO is over in the corner talking to the bailiffs. And their whole job is just to regulate us. So when stuff actually starts happening in court and we're all doing our jobs, they don't have anything to do. And I mean, they're not really interested in the proceedings. So they're just like whispering amongst themselves. It's ridiculous. But anyway, somebody wants to know, how did Masterson react? I didn't really see a reaction from him other than just like stewing, like, this sucks kind of thing. But one thing to keep in mind is, I mean, there's really no way he couldn't have seen this coming. I mean, his lawyers argued for concurrent sentences, said it should be 15 years to life. But they even acknowledged there's no other sentence he can get other than 15 years. So, I mean, I think Danny had to have gone into this knowing that he was going to get a lengthy time in prison. And the idea that it would just be 15 years is pretty far-fetched. So it was victim impact statements first up. And I guess Chrissy Carnell Bixler, who I feel like I should go back and fix the article, because I think I said that she didn't attend in person, but she was in the courtroom. She just didn't read her victim impact statement. Somebody else read that for her. So I should probably go into the article and get that fixed. But yeah, the article has all the details in it. Chrissy's statement was first up. And I mean, she was with him for 6 years. So you just got to imagine, like, you know, what a life, what a big thing in her life this has been for so long. I mean, all of them. But she had known Danny for 6 years and said that she was in a really abusive relationship with him. Yeah, I think things are pretty much dying down around here. I think everybody's gone. Yeah, I'm updating the story because she did attend the hearing with her husband. I think the husband was in court. I don't know. I mean, I did get a picture of them leaving, but I just kind of feel like taking pictures of the victims and like putting them on. I mean, if they don't want their pictures out there, we shouldn't put the pictures out there. So I'm not gonna put anything like that in there. The Weiss reaction, she was really upset in the very beginning. Bijou was like just kind of standing in the hallway, and she had dark sunglasses on, and she really wasn't talking to anyone. And then when everyone got into court and they brought Danny in, I could see her like sobbing. You could hear her sobbing and crying. And I was kind of like, oh gosh, if she's already doing that, you know, what's the rest of the sentencing going to be like? Because the bailiffs did warn us that it needs to be quiet in the courtroom. He knows this is an emotional situation, but if anyone has an emotional outburst, they need to leave. So, I mean, I was kind of bracing for, oh gosh, are they going to try to kick her out? But she didn't, throughout the hearing, she seemed composed. I mean, it was hard to see because there were so many people packed in, but I didn't hear any audible reaction because, I mean, like I said, this was not, I mean, at least his lawyers didn't do something just crazy and almost basically just ripping Danny off by charging him money to try to go convince the judge to give him probation or something. Like, I mean, his lawyers are actually like experienced criminal defense lawyers, and they did file a motion for appeal, a motion for new trial that I still haven't gotten a copy of, but it was filed on the 5th, and they argued some statute of limitations stuff. And basically they were asking Judge Olmedo to go back and reverse a ruling by another trial court judge, which she said she couldn't do. But they had an appellate lawyer from San Diego, Ben Coleman, who's a respected appellate attorney, came in and argued that. So that was rejected really fast by Judge Olmedo. They did that argument and then went into the victim impact statements. And Chrissy's statement was up first. Ariel Anson, the prosecutor who was talking earlier read it aloud. And I'm trying to think how many minutes it was. I mean, I think NT's statement was at least 10 minutes, probably longer. Jennifer B spoke for probably 20 minutes or so. And I mean, it was a lot. Chrissy talked about how she said that she wishes one question that people had asked her, and I'm sure people who know all the details of the testimony in the trial, like Tony Ortega, this will make sense to. But she said that she wished she'd been asked why she waited for 2 hours after the attack. She hid from him for 2 hours in a friend's house, and she said that that shows how real her fear was, but that he's so charming that he basically convinced her friends as he was waiting for her that he hadn't done anything bad and that he was this sweet, charming guy. So they convinced her. They were like, oh, he's such a charming guy. He's so nice. This is so romantic that he's waiting for you like this. She said she believed them and didn't trust her intuition and went back into the relationship and etc. So one thing that's so annoying about this court, I mean, it's just ludicrous how we can't get court documents online, but there are 50 letters of support written for Danny. All his siblings wrote letters. I mean, I imagine there are celebrities in those letters, and Judge Olmedo read all of them, but someone told me that when the sentencing memorandums were filed, she said not to make them public, which I don't even know how that's legal. I mean, you have to have a legal justified reason to seal a court document. You can't just be like, well, this is a high profile case and we really don't want to deal with media coverage, so let's just lock this out of the I mean, how is that even allowed? But to get those letters, I really doubt I can get them today. They're not going to email them to me. I mean, I'm probably going to have to come up here tomorrow and go into the clerk's office and pay hundreds of dollars for them or something. It's just ridiculous how this court operates. This is a high profile case. Judge Olmedo read all those letters before she decided her sentence. They should be handed to us in digital form, or the court should just have a stack of them for reporters there. I seriously don't even understand this. But let me get back into the story here. But Olmedo's comments. Wow. She I think if you could hear the press conference, you heard Reinhold Mueller say that the comments really didn't surprise her at all. But I mean, she was really forceful with Danny and said, Mr. Masterson, you are not the victim here. Your actions 20 years ago took away another person's choice and voice. Your actions 20 years ago today were criminal. That today might not be in there. We're criminal, and that's why you are here. Olmedo told Masterson she knows he's wondering how you can be convicted of each charge of I gotta kind of go through this a little bit, but of a charge of sexually, yeah. Yeah, I just had to update a couple of those, but and that was one thing that Olmedo really emphasized in her statement was these were not allegations made 20 years after the fact, that he had that all the women told someone pretty shortly after it, their mother, their friend or something, so they had corroborating evidence through that. But one thing that struck me, and I think this was well addressed in the press conference, was the Church of Scientology. The women really came down on the Church of Scientology, condemned them, called it the cult of Scientology, and just talked about just all the influence that they had in this investigation, which I think was pretty powerful to see. So again, let me pull up the story here because I want you guys to be sure to read it. I'll be updating it a little bit later, but luckily, because we were able to take notes in there by hand, I don't think there's really all that much to update, except I want to get his statements and all the motions and stuff and go go over it. But yeah, she said, Mr. Masterson, you are not the victim here. Your actions 20 years ago took away another person's choice and voice. Your actions 20 years ago were criminal, and that's why you're here. She told, and this is how she started out. She told Masterson that she knows he's wondering, how he can be convicted of a sexual incident that occurred 20 years ago and involved a woman you believe is disgruntled and has a vendetta against you. But she's like, but Mr. Masterson, you were not convicted on the testimony of one person. You were not convicted based on rumors, innuendo, gossip, and speculation. You were convicted based on evidence that 12 people in the community found to be credible. You were convicted because each of the victims reported the rapes to someone shortly after the rapes occurred. And I mean, like I said, I've seen judges go off on defendants before, but not recently. And especially after all the Tory Lane stuff, it was like, wow, go Judge Olmedo. I mean, recognize your power as a judge. And I've always wondered why judges don't say things more to defendants before they sentence them. And when I was up in Spokane and covered a sentencing for a murder case, and a double murder case, and I thought the judge was way too nice to the defendant in the sentencing. I remember one of the victim's mother, I had lunch with her afterward, and I talked to her about that. And she said that she thought the judge was doing a good job to protect the appeal. And at the time, I just didn't really know what a dumb statement that was. Not dumb, but just wrong. Like, it was just, I mean, the idea that the judge would say something at sentencing that would then be, I don't know. I think judges have tons of room to go off on people like that. Before this, the biggest one I saw was Judge Goethals. Tom Goethals in Orange County told Scott DeCry, the Seal Beach mass murderer, that the day the murders happened, the gates of hell opened and he stepped out of them. And it was, he had a lot more to say to the guy than that. But and the judge quoted Martin Luther King Jr. The ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. And that photo of Danny and Bijou, that was during the first trial. I remember when I got that, because I mean, Danny was just out of custody for the whole time, both trials. Like, I was just used to always seeing him in the hallway, and I'm not making any kind of comment about the case, but I mean, they were polite. Like, it was just like, it wasn't a bad interaction when you see him. And I remember I was trying to get a photo of him leaving the courthouse, and their friend Chris said something to me. He's like, hey, well, if you want a photo of him, like, you could just ask him. Like, and it was kind of like, oh yeah. And I said, hey, you guys want to pose for a photo? And they said, sure. So remember, the other reporters, when they saw this, were just like aghast. They're just like, oh my God, I can't believe you got that photo. It's so iconic with like the skyline and everything. And people were telling me, like, if he gets convicted, like, this is going to be like the iconic photo. But of course, that was the first trial where it was actually a split mistrial because of a split jury, and they were in favor of not guilty across the board. It was like 10-2, 8-4, 7-5. So prosecutors upped their case, revamped the case, did a second trial, had an expert witness on Scientology, really kind of fine-tuned it. It was a shorter case too, and were able to get a conviction on the 2 counts. And the 2 counts is what they needed to beat the statute of limitations, because I've had some questions about the statute of limitations and how it applies or it doesn't apply. And I know that they needed to get convictions on 2 rapes to have the multiple instances exception to the statute of limitations. So they were able to get that. But Chrissy Carnell Bixler's statement was read first, but then NT spoke in person. And she's identified herself by her name, but the last conversation I had with the lawyer for the women told me that she just wants to be identified by her initials. So I think other publications are identifying her elsewhere, or maybe have her full name or something, but I'm just going to keep with the NT because I haven't heard anything else. But she said you lived your life behind a mask as 2 people, but the real one sits here now. You are pathetic, disturbed, and extremely violent, and the world is safer with you in prison. And she actually brought up his DJ name, DJ Donkey Punch, and said that it's pretty appropriate because she said, you relish in hurting women. It is your addiction. It is without question your favorite thing to do. And she had a lot more to say to this, but this is just what I was able to get notes on. She said, life is precious and fragile. Find your heart. Learn something. She's telling them to do this in prison. Read books. Listen to the brightness of nothing and get well. I forgive you. And she also had a few things to say about the Church of Scientology. So she said they were Masterson's enabler and protector, and she was a brainwashed member for 7 years. The church knew you had been raping its members, but made concerted efforts to not only punish the victims for being assaulted by you, but to also cover up the rapes. So it was pretty powerful just to have all this out there like that. You know, all this. Bijou will be okay. They have visiting in prison. Yeah, and you know, one thing Reinhold brought up was the elderly release. That he's probably going to be eligible for release sooner than 30 years because he's right now 47, and I mean 30 years he'd be 77. So off the top of his head, Reinhold didn't know like what the exact requirements are or what the qualifications are for the elderly release, but he might be able to, by the time he's like 70 or something, like 20 years or something, be able to just apply for that. It's not just an automatic thing. And that was one thing that Phil Cohen brought up. And really I should emphasize in my article more is that 30 years to life does not mean 30 years. It means in 30 years, that's when he's eligible for his first parole hearing. And actually it's 85% of 30 years, which I can't do the math on that, but I mean, it's a long time. And keep in mind, he's 47. But Leah Remini, who I've talked to her a little bit, but she was here, and she's been here throughout the trial, like showing support for the victims and everything. But I think a lot of people have heard about her new lawsuit against the Church of Scientology. So she was there, and actually Jennifer B. addressed allegations that Remini is somehow like behind this all, because there's kind of a thought that, you know, Leah Remini got all these women together to conspire against Danny Masterson, and Jennifer B. just said, sorry, Leah's not behind this. But I tweeted this too. One of the, my favorite quote from her was, Marty Singer. And as a lawyer nerd, all this Marty Singer stuff fascinates me, because Marty Singer's a big time Hollywood power lawyer, and he represented Masterson back in 2003, 2004, when these allegations first came out, and was actually the lawyer who arranged this non-disclosure agreement with NT and had her sign it. And I forget what the actual payment was, but Judge Olmedo referenced this in her comments to Masterson, said that the payment he arranged in the non-disclosure agreement, it was almost $1 million. And she said, that's an awful lot of money to pay to silence somebody for an incident that never happened. I mean, yeah, the non-disclosure agreement in the payment that happened back then was pretty compelling evidence here. And I remember in the first trial that's what got my attention about the Masterson case, is I heard in the first trial that Marty Singer was actually going to testify. And I'm like, oh, dude, I'll be front row for that. He didn't, but he's still pretty involved in all the backlash of the case, the background of the case. But Jennifer was talking about how her 9-year-old daughter was brought into this. Like, I guess the non-disclosure agreement specifically named her 9-year-old daughter, but only used a alias for Danny Masterson. And she said when the investigation was going on, she got a letter from Marty Singer saying that she was in violation of this non-disclosure agreement. And she had probably my favorite quote in court. She said, "I'm here to say that I did not govern myself accordingly." But anyway, I encourage everyone to check out the okay, yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, thanks. Hey, yeah, thank you for thank you for pointing that out. I'll go in there and fix that right now. But yeah, you're right. They were in favor of not guilty in the first trial. The deadlocks in the first trial were all in favor of not guilty, but the 8-4 in the second trial was in favor of guilty for Chrissy. So yeah, let me fix that right now. Favor of guilty. Yeah, no, that's a good one to. Well, and this is the kind of thing where it's like, do I? I mean, and I think it's an overall good rule. Like when you're making a change in a story, to say that you changed it. But I mean, this article's so new, and this is kind of an evolving story that it would almost just alert more people to it been necessary. So here it is. One thing I should probably sign off here because I should go get some food, and I need to respond to a bunch of interviews and stuff. But there's more to say. I want to do a sit down with Tony Ortega and just talk about some of the unusual issues with Scientology here, because it was, Reinhold Mueller talked in the press conference about his experiences as a sex crimes prosecutor, but you don't usually see this. You don't usually see the Church of Scientology is really never involved in this kind of stuff. And in one interesting aspect in the trial, and I've heard from Masterson's camp that, they're hopeful that this will be an issue on appeal, is all the testimony from the victims about stalking and harassment by the Church of Scientology. And they were told by Judge Olmedo. Judge Olmedo warned the jury that the testimony about stalking and harassment should not be considered for the truth of the matter, but to establish state of mind for the victims, because it goes into why they didn't report things like that. So, but it's pretty inflammatory testimony, and just like the unknownness and the kind of unprecedented nature of the Church of Scientology in this, that I think Masterson's camp is hopeful that there's like an appellate issue there, but it wasn't an issue that I heard brought up in their motion for appeal. And it just wasn't, it wasn't brought up at all. And it's not something Olmedo would have like taken back or been like, oh yeah, you're right, I shouldn't have done that kind of thing. And somebody said, this is the biggest example of like a judge who actually knows what she's doing. She's in long cause, which is like where the complex criminal cases, like you have to work your way up to long cause. And also Olmedo is a former AUSA. And when I first started covering Superior Court trials, and I was like, holy shit, this is like, what is this? Like kindergarten law school? Some of these prosecutors were just terrible. And somebody told me they're like, deputy DAs hate judges who are former federal prosecutors, right? Because that they make them like follow law and stuff. But in the U.S. Attorney's Office and federal prosecutors just kind of have a more refined approach. But Olmedo was good friends with Beverly O'Connell, who was appointed to the federal bench and actually died pretty tragically and unexpectedly a few years ago. But I was reading about O'Connell and read some quotes about Olmedo in there, and I was like, oh, they were friends. But and I remember Olmedo said something, actually Tony Ortega quoted it in his one of his daily reports, but apparently somebody was talking about, or a lawyer made a comment, they were doing another hearing, and a lawyer commented to Olmedo that the sketch that they saw from the trial made her look like she was like some kind of goth judge. And Olmedo said something like, oh, how did they know what I looked like back in college or something? Like, no, and I think this person is right. Like Hereford is, he has all these garden variety assault cases, and it's, just these overburdened dockets. It's like when he actually got a chance to like sit down and like argue law with lawyers, he's just a nerd, and he kind of liked that stuff. So he liked having a two-day hearing on that. But Olmedo nipped it all in the bud really quick. But the victim impact statements were the longest, which is how it should have been. It was, I think it was hard to keep track, but I think NT spoke for about 20. Jennifer definitely spoke for about 20 minutes. NT was probably between 10 or 20, and Chrissy's statement was like at least 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. But and one thing that Chrissy's statement did at the very beginning was thank Judge Olmedo for giving her a chance to speak like this, that she's hoping that it helps her and her family. So, Judge Olmedo's comments here to Masterson, I'm scrolling through again. That was pretty remarkable. I think I'm going to go live with Tony Ortega either maybe tonight or tomorrow and share some more stuff. But I'll keep sharing, tweeting out updates and let you guys know when I'm on TV. I wish I could kind of just stay here and keep going through it, but it's kind of quiet, and we need to go get lunch and take the train back home and everything. So, yep, it was a crazy morning in court, but thank you all for joining me. And remember, legalaffairsandtrials.com is where everything is. I'm going to upload the video of the press conference here soon too. And I will be getting the letters and motions and everything eventually. I just it's just going to take a little bit because LA Superior Court's archaic. But somebody says, I'm just joining. Did I miss it? Kind of. But yeah, he got sentenced to 30 years to life in prison, and the judge told him he's guilty and that his defense was bullshit, basically. She didn't use that kind of phrase, but she was very clearly, made it clear what she thinks her views are on it. So again, I wish I could just stay here forever. I told somebody a while back, I'm like, what if I just went live all day, every day? But no, I probably shouldn't do that. I should take off. But thanks for tuning in, and check out the story on legalaffairsandtrials.com.